Welcome, everybody. We are back for another edition of the ComicCorp podcast, now with even more comics. I am your host, Chad Porto. This is the second show we've done this week, because Tuesday I was tired, and yesterday Zach was El Sicko. El Sicko? I don't know what Spanish is for sick. Joining me on this broadcast, as always, is the glorious one himself, Marcus Green. Marcus, we have a busy weekend. Apparently, there's an NWA pay-per-view on Saturday, and then there's something called the Rumble of Royals on Sunday. So Sunday's show is going to be super fucking jam-packed.
Yeah, between the anime stuff we watched, just to look something else will pop up.
Oh, so Wrestling Underground. What's it called? Hard Times. And Royal Rumble review. Ooh, boy. It's going to be a show. It's going to be a show. And out from underneath his bed he cometh. It is Zachary Tyler. Hey, look at that. It's the sun. Oh, it's on my skin. Oh, it's burning my skin. Ow. I'm a vampire now. Duncan.
I had my suspicions. But the sun confirmed it.
It really started when you were trying to have a garlic parm the night before, and it just wouldn't sit well.
Yeah, I was like, well, it's either I have a stomach bug or I am of the vampires.
Yep. Unfortunately, we figured out which one it was, and it wasn't the one we were all hoping for. He's lay vampire now. So. My dedication for this year it was to revive the ComicCorp podcast under the idea of actually talking about comics. Holy fucking shit.
Shocking.
Right, and here we are. We will still cover other stuff in nerddom, but this week's show is going to specifically revolve around the first arc of The Boys, and honestly, if I had known it was only 2 issues, I would have done the first 2 or 3 arcs, because apparently Garth Ennis likes to work in 2s and 3s, not 6s and 8s like most other writers. Garth Ennis, if I remember correctly, also created Preacher. Zachary, am I right about that one?
I believe so.
He's got a
double check.
Okay, you double check. That works for me. He's got a very twisted kind of point of view. Now, the thing with the comic is Marcus and I think Zach has too, but maybe not. We've seen the show, the first season. And a lot of the first season is a bulk of the original run of the books.
Yes, he did do Preacher.
So Garth Ennis got some real fucked up nastiness going on.
And unsurprisingly, he also had a run on Punisher.
I'm shocked and flabbergasted, I tell you. So we're going to talk about the first arc, which is only 2 issues. We're going to talk about the art, the writing, the differences between the show, and just kind of, I want to start off by saying this. In the show, Simon Pegg is the father of, I always forget his name, Dewey or Eugene or whatever.
Hughie?
Hughie. There it is. Huey, Dewey, and Louie. And in the comic, Huey looks just like Simon Pegg.
He does.
I don't know if that was done intentionally or if it was played for laughs. Like, I don't know. But that's one of those mysteries I'd like to eventually find out one day. Marcus, I know a lot of us, we've all read a lot of weird things in the world of comic bookdom at some point or another. But I have to imagine books like The Boys and Preacher would be a fairly new avenue to the type of things you're used to reading. Going into the first issue of The Boys and getting through it, what was your initial takeaway from this?
Well, it made me in a way fall in love with it all over again.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of ways, and also kind of made me like, oh, okay, they pulled back here. Then they emphasized that, oh wow, they didn't use this part at all. But yeah, I mean, it made me appreciate both mediums even more, but just because of how much they kind of complement each other. And yes, I'm so glad you and Zach kind of made that comparison with Simon Pegg, because I never felt right looking at Huey at all. Like, Robin worked, and then she literally worked until A-Train's ass showed up again, and I cried again. But yeah, I mean, it just certainly, I mean, we're gonna get off into it, but it definitely made me appreciate the casting just because of the energy that these characters was giving off just reading some of this stuff. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I necessarily want to jump into Preacher because the show is already whacking up, but this pretty much worked for me. Like I said, the comparison and contrast was probably my favorite thing because I was constantly flashing back in between the book and the show.
I think one of the things to remember while we talk about Garth Ennis is he hates superheroes. Like as a medium, he despises them. So it's kind of like I feel like someone who's on opposing holy ground. Like you respect it, but it still makes you feel a little queasy because you're like, I don't know if I should be doing this. Because I'm a big fan of the superheroes, of the capes and the cowls and the what's nots. But
Mm.
reading this, I mean, this is really well done, and a lot of the ideas that went into this is phenomenal. I don't want to get into the spoiler, but the revelation as to Homelander, because if you've seen the show, and a bit of a spoiler alert, which is not really big of a spoiler alert, this is decades plus old. He's a psychopath. He's a Superman analog for this universe, but there's a reason for his depravity, and I hope they kind of fall in line with it with the show because I think it's a great twist. But in the last real big arc of the boys, something is revealed that explains why he is the way he is, and it's completely, totally out of the goddamn blue. And there's like a little bit of foreshadowing, but it's kind of like it's like you know how like sometimes like you'll see like these like little it's like a piece of paper and there'll be like little holes in them and like you're supposed to line it up just perfectly with like like a page in a book and it tells you like a coded message. Like you can look at the
Yeah.
holes and know that it's a coded message, but you ain't gonna know what it is until you lay it down. That's exactly what's going on in the boys when it comes to Homelander. And when you realize that kind of depth and multitude of layerings for even just the most generic of villains, there is a lot of respectability there. The one thing I will say is Enos does do a lot more with kind of poking fun or making light of certain things. And I don't know if that always lands well with the message he's trying to go for. I think one of the themes that he was definitely going for is this idea of, you know, I don't want to say toxic masculinity because that's not a thing, but this idea of drastical imbalances in the human psyche in moments of stress. But he plays it for laughs or he more or less belittles it. I feel like that doesn't land just right when you're talking about such heavy content. But then again, he wrote an entire comic book where Hitler got out of hell and this kid got his face blown off with a shotgun. So like I don't know, Garth Ennis probably
Yeah,
needs psychiatric therapy.
yeah. I just finna say while you was talking about that, I'm like, yeah, this is the same guy because if he's behind Preacher, and then when we saw on the show, I'm like, he thought it was a good idea to try to give Hitler a good arc, and then took him right back to being heel, and then I was like, yep. And then now you mentioning that, I'm like, well, between that and the fact that I'll never be able to look at a bulldog the same way again,
So
specifically with my.
I hate to say this to you, Marcus, because I'm going to ruin so much of your life right now. Do you remember Jackie Early Haley in the first season of Preacher? How he was that butcher kingpin, had all that meat.
Yeah,
Well, in the comics, his character wasn't just confined to that first arc. Now I didn't read all this, so my explanation may not be as poignant and precise. But at one point, that character ends up creating like a meat fuck puppet, if you will, and he has sex with it because Garth Ennis does not give a fuck about social conventions. So he writes story arcs where psychotic butchers, like meat peddlers. There's no really good way of describing people who sell meat that doesn't sound like some type of felonious assault on humanity. Meat peddlers, butchers. He kills things and sells the parts. But he wrote an entire arc where this dude had sex with a goddamn pile of meat. This is the kind of mind we're in the head of. So it's gonna be a thing. So Zach, you saw this first season of Boys, right?
I have not seen it yet. I've meant to. It looks really good, and I can't say that I am not a fan of Carl Urban.
Carl Urban is the greatest gift Australia and or New Zealand has ever gifted the world. I forget which one he's from. He's phenomenal.
Dread 2, please.
Yeah,
Yes.
he's the best thing on the show. Like right across from the guy that plays Homelander.
And Homelander is great because he's so psychotic. So we will dispel some minor spoilers, but they're not going to be significant. Now, this is going to be like episode 1, episode 2 stuff. So, like,
Right.
you're supposed to binge that show, so I feel like it's not a big spoiler to talk about early episode endings. Hughie's girlfriend gets goddamn splattered.
Uh-huh. Real good.
Real fucking good. I'm going to refrain from showing the panel because this is going on YouTube and I don't want to get dinged by YouTube. But essentially, bits oh honey in the goddamn brick wall. Now, in the comic, the whole kind of deal transpires in a fair. They're in Scotland, I believe, because Hughie's Scottish. And which is a change from the television show where where Hughie's actually a second generation immigrant, I think, because his father might be from UK. I don't remember if he had an accent or not, but he's not, Scottish, at least not by birth, maybe by heritage. So it happens in like New York City in the show, and instead of it happening at a fair, they're walking from Hughie's work, I believe, and they're about to cross a street. But the basic idea is the same. A-Train has an event that causes the death of Hughie's girlfriend. In the show, A-Train is high and runs through her and makes her a mist cloud of person, just gone. While in the comic, A-Train grabs a supervillain, spins him around, and whips him into the wall, hitting Hughie's girlfriend and killing her instantly. But the image of him holding her severed arms remains. And the show had him just start screaming, which, I mean, duh. While in the comic, he had a bit more of a emotional grappling session to try to understand what just happened. And then he started to freak out, and they ended up having to sedate him to calm him down. That kind of launched off into the rest of the book. On the flip side, we get to meet, I keep wanting to call him Hannibal, Butcher, which ironically enough. And Butcher in the show is someone who's kind of aloof but also mysterious when he first shows up. He rolls up on Hughie, and Hughie's dealing with a bit of a invisible problem, and Butcher helps Hughie fight the dude, and it's a really great fucking fight scene. That character, who's translucence, isn't in the comic, and Marcus, I think you'll agree with me. The best line of the entire first 2 episodes was was Butcher going, translucence doesn't mean invisible, you fucking idiots.
It's just like I said. It's why I appreciate both of them, because both mediums took the liberties that those mediums allowed.
Mm-hmm.
So like the trans, I can't even see like going back in the first season and not having that translucent part, because it set up exactly like the personality going forward of what we was gonna get from Billy.
Mm-hmm.
And just like the sudden extremes we get from Hughie, because he had to completely snap out of the Robin stuff to be killed or accidentally killed, accidentally by Billy, or on purpose, of course, by Translucent. who we have to remember is also naked while this is going down. So it's even funnier when stuff happens to him. So
That's very true. Translucent is all kinds of naked. So we also get to see, I believe, what was her name? Mallory? Was that what it was?
yeah, Mallory.
His FBI contact. Now, this is one of the things that kind of stayed fairly consistent in both the comic and the TV show. They have a physical relationship, or at least did, despite the fact that Mallory had a husband and children, or still does. So it's established that Billy is working with the CIA, and that Mallory is his handler. And basically, they very much have a love-hate relationship. I, Part of me is trying to understand why Garth Ennis wrote Butcher this way in the comic. In the TV show, it's made to kind of feel like they're almost battalion buddies, if you will. You know, like they both went through some shit. So there's a dynamic between the two that would supersede just the common bond. So a physical relationship isn't completely out of the woods on that. But in the comic, it makes it seem like he's doing it much more for almost a twisted sense of pleasure to hurt her.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else kind of pick up on that?
Yeah, I could definitely get that. Like, he very much enjoys how disgusted she is with both him and herself for performing these actions with him.
Yeah, it's interesting because he basically puts all the onus on her because it's like, well, if you gonna let me clap the cheeks, I'm gonna do it. Then I'm gonna just, you know, after I get done, how's the fam love? Like it is, because again, it's kind of all on her. She knows what she's doing, and he's not gonna stop being him. So, you know, I just think he's having fun with the whole thing, and she's really the effed up person because she's clearly trying to be several different things at the same time, and I guess trying to justify it by trying to paint him in a certain character corner, but she's really no better, if not worse, because she's sitting up there being defiled in front of a family photo, and then letting him touch it, and then telling him that I guess the dude in the photo was better than him. Well, clearly not in every sense of the way. So, it's a very interesting take, but he's having a ball, literally.
You know, you mentioned that, and there's a scene later on that I ended up reading because I just kind of got into it. The whole there's a situation in the show, Zach, where a hero by the name of Lamplighter ends up attacking one of the older members of the team's family, and in the show it's a woman, in the comics it's a man, but Lamplighter ends up killing this individual's grandchild's, and it's kind of alluded to that things were put in motion by Mallory for this to happen. And there's a line in the comic where she's like, the only reason I keep letting you do this is because you threatened to kill my family. And Butcher goes, love, killing kids isn't my game. It's yours. So that kind of harkens to Marcus's point that, a lot of what she does or allows to be done is very much a sign of who she is, because she is not the hero in this story. I mean, neither is Butcher, especially when you get to the end of the run. But the idea of her being just as twisted as he is very true to this. I need to read more of the book to kind of understand her frame of mind, but a lot of what Garth Ennis writes at times is shocking for the sake of shocking. It's not as deep as he thinks it is, and honestly, Zach, you know the writer who I think of when I think of self-serving indulgence. Grant Morrison.
I can think of a couple, but I'm guessing Morrison.
It's Morrison. Garth Ennis is the Grant Morrison of anti-hero comics. He thinks that a lot of what he's saying has a lot more depth than it does, and it isn't. There is a great panel, though, and I have it open right now. It's when the Vought American suits come to visit Hughie in Scotland, and this is one of the cooler things that I think can be done in comics in just a way of setting up a kind of a narrative or at least a point of perspective. There's only 3 people. They're all wearing suits, and none of the speech bubbles have any connection to any of the characters. And for me, I don't know how you guys read this, but I saw this as Hughie hearing but not listening.
Yeah, I definitely felt the same because not only do none of them connect, none of the speech bubbles are full, complete thoughts or sentences.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the more brilliant aspects, specifically these first 2 issues, and they translated well in the show as well, and the actor does a great job with that, specifically because of his facial expressions have to sell the whole thing. But here, I mean, look, it's really in real life, specifically. I mean, the guy's in shock,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like you can like basically it sums up. You're hearing, but you're not listening. And then they do this thing where it kind of, and maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead, but it kind of does this thing where it fades to black, and now it's the internal dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that's such a great way to not, I think if somebody's not really paying attention, and they're so focused on why the certain bubbles don't connect, they can kind of get lost in the sauce, if you will. But because I think we know, and we're just smart in general, we kind of connected it quite quick. And I just think, like I said, it's probably one of the better parts of not only that character but of this book. And I think they did a great way, like Zach said, of not having to be coherent, because these guys are just really there to ramble off the legal jargon anyway. I'm pretty sure they've given this speech over thousands of times, specifically dealing with somebody as reckless as A-Train. So they're basically the Mr. Anderson guys from the Matrix.
Essentially, and that's kind of how I saw them too. Very much the Mr. Anderson. So we then get Hughie kind of having a breakdown, and that's where Butcher finds him in the middle of a park. And the first panel of them together shows essentially, little tiny Simon Pegg, head in his hands, bawling his eyes out, and then goddamn Frank Castle sitting next to him. And it looks just as awkward as you can imagine. If you're listening to the podcast, you don't see the images. It looks pretty fucking awkward. And while he did have a bit of a role in the show, the comic severely overly emphasizes Butcher's dog. What's his name, Marcus? Zach, you remember the name of the dog?
It's Terror.
Terror. It's Terror. Yeah, that's how apropos.
And Terror likes to do what Terror likes to do. During the conversation with Hughie, Butcher essentially explains to him about the reality of heroes and, the depravities that they get into. And then when Hughie basically can't take the sound of this yapping dog, Butcher relieves him of this burden and agony by telling Terror to do what Terror does best. Fuck. Again, I'm going to refrain from posting the panel, but Terror mounts this little Shih Tzu and, well, does to the Shih Tzu what a bulldog would do to a Shih Tzu.
Yeah, he dick sicked him on him, and what was even worse is you realize it's a boy.
Yeah, it's not a female dog.
So when that goes right back to what you said, he kind of the writer creator does stuff for the F of it.
Yup.
Because this was completely unnecessary. Like you couldn't blow the guy up a balloon animal or something. Like you basically just and the owner is terrified, by the way. She's an innocent person.
Yeah.
This is her Huey Robin moment.
And the shots of the dog, I mean, goddamn. They don't show too much. It's not that graphic. It is a graphic novel in a lot of sense, but it's not that graphic. But you do see it happening, and it does kind of like smack you in the face. It's rough. Oh God, I just realized the pun.
He also, and don't I think well I think Chad, I don't know Zach, but he reminds me of the big bald bulldog from Van Wilder.
I could see that.
Yeah.
I could definitely see that. Um, so that's essentially the first issue. The stuff with Terror doesn't start until the second. Um, Thoughts on the first issue? How it set things up? How it put things in motion? What did you guys think of it? Do you think it did a good job, kind of getting things ready for what was to come? Zach?
Yeah, I think so. It was your standard, 21, 22 page length comic, but it definitely delved into, here's a quick little shot of a superhero that's reckless and doesn't give much of a fuck about the bystanders around him. But that's an overarching problem with not just this superhero, but superheroes in general.
Mm-hmm. Marcus?
I dug it. Like I said, I immediately was going back and forth to comparison contrast, but I think what's kind of ingratiating about seeing it in the comic form is they really leaning into the boys right now, and they only gave us like a taste of the heroes.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think from the show perspective, they gave us certain instances of certain things on both sides immediately. So because there are no real heroes in this thing. At the end of the day, it's just people doing things in a gray area. Uh, for the good or the bad. It's kind of left up to the audience to decide a lot of times, which is great about the show. But here, it's we immediately get more into the boys, and then obviously it's gonna get really. I imagine this guy's mind is gonna get real depraved, if you will, when we get to the heroes. Because if we kicking stuff off like this with the dog, and we haven't even got it, we see a literal, we see a perspective, Homelander from Billy's perspective, and that's it.
Yep.
So, but it's different in the show. So like I said, that build to the anticipation is great. Specifically, having seen the show first, so it's really cool for me.
You're right in the sense of how they show the heroes. In the show, they kind of make Starlight this very wholesome but kind of naive / abused figure. But in the comics, she's a lot more portrayed as willfully ignorant and goes along with... Because, spoiler alert, she ends up doing some nasty with the Deep. But it's framed in the show as the Deep kind of verbally forces her. I can't say coerce. I said it. And it's kind of viewed as a assault of proportions. In the comic, it's very much viewed as her willingly doing something to get into the group. So there is a bit of that idea that even the hero of the heroes isn't as heroic as one would think, because she doesn't have the same standards that you would hope that one would have in that. But much like the show, the comic version of her does have a lot of optimism and hope, but she is a bit more raunchy. But I think that works for what they're going for.
Even just two issues in, and you talk about it. It's interesting because obviously the world we're living in, the world this show is being shown in, they've taken some care to be like, okay, there's certain things we just can't frame in the same way the comics have, just because of the potential backlash of it. Like that with Starlight would have came off as like, oh, this is how we gonna do women.
I feel like there might be some truth to that, but I also have to remind you that we saw a dude shoot out of a vagina, so like this show didn't give a fuck. Like this show does not give a fuck about how people perceive it. So the first boy that we meet outside of Butcher is the Frenchman. Frenchie, I forget his name. And he's having a psychotic moment in a coffee shop in an undisclosed portion of the city in somewhere, I don't know. and he's pissing people off, and then he gets into a fight, and then Butcher shows up, and Frenchie's happy because it means he gets to kill people again. I mean, it's the little things in life, right? The difference between the characters is in the show, he does not like Butcher. He does not want to be involved with him. He knows what Butcher brings to the table, and the Frenchman's like, no. In the comic, it's the exact 180.
Yeah, it's really cool because nobody really has that affection. I mean, we have that affection for Carl Urban, but the characters don't. So to see this type of interaction in the comics, and that there's as mysterious as Chad talking about him being that there's actual layers to this guy both in the show, and in his book, which we'll get to in a certain family interaction later. But that was cool. It was also interesting seeing people hurl French slurs. Like almost on some sacre bleu these nuts like type of deal. Like it was interesting, but well, and then like the great through line through both issues is just him sitting back watching his people be these depraved asshats. It's like good times, and then he goes and get them. So it's the gray area is in which they play in is always fun to watch.
What do they call him? Quitter? Surrender? Something like that.
White flag waiver, something.
It's the N-word and white flag waiver. Like them's the words you just cannot use in polite society. Hang on, I gotta look it up because it was so dumb. You fucking cheese eater. Oh God. They called him. Now I find this offensive because how dare you slur monkeys like that? But he called him a surrender monkey. Listen, man, I've seen enough. I've seen enough zoo gone wrong stories to know that monkeys do not surrender.
No,
they fling their poop and eat your face. There is no third gear with monkeys, man. I tell you what.
I feel like that's almost like a negative sexual jail implication with that. A surrender monkey?
Right? Like, there's a lot going on there. This was written in 2006, and for context, in 2006, France had literally banned the United States from flying over their country about 2 years prior. They were very hands-off in the Second Gulf War, and a lot of people kind of viewed France in this time period as very much a bunch of, well, pussies. I don't know if that's a slur, but there it is. Whether right or wrong, that's just kind of the global narrative on France in this time period when this was more than likely being written, because if you're any type of writer, you know that there's a bit of a lag between when you write something and when it gets published. So I would imagine that Enos was writing this in 2004 when this tension with France was at an all-time high. So there's that. The next version of the boys is actually not a boy. It's a girl. It's the female. She doesn't have a name yet, and she's kind of looking kind of lost. She looks like a Grant Morrison character, actually. Zach, I thought she looked kind of like... did you ever read the Sandman books?
I did not read the Sandman books, no.
She looks like how he presented Death, who was like a 1980s goth punk chick. And the first few panels kind of, really harkened on that same vibe.
I thought Sandman was Neil Gaiman.
I'm sorry, you're right, Neil Gaiman. Not my bad. Neil Gaiman's actually a solid writer. Trippy as fuck, though.
Yeah.
I think didn't Neil Gaiman also do some Constantine Hellblazer?
Let's find out.
Because I know the characters intersected at one point.
Let's see, Neil Gaiman, Sandman, Stardust.
Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream. Make him the cutest thing that I've ever seen. Boom, 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 boom. Me and Mark's about to do some early 50s doo-wop, so just, hang in there, folks. So, while Zach looks at his Neil Gaiman backlog, the female is apparently kind of lost without Butcher and the boys, and she's taken up doing hits for a local mob. And we see her ringing on the door, and a group of ruffians, rapscallions, dare I say thugs, are inside, and they're being ne'er-do-wells, which I think is a very weird word for criminals because they don't near to do well. They near to do harm, more likely. And they're being... this might be my own racial prejudice is coming through, but I very much read this as a bunch of Italian mafiosos, and I was like, I don't know if I'm self-racisting or not.
It was just so weird because like they went through like a bunch of dialogue, but it's basically can be summed up. Hey, you hear somebody soft knocking? Look out the window. Who is it? Some damn girl. What she want? I don't know. Ask her. She ain't saying. Maybe she wants some dick.
And like the way they I don't know who did the illustrations. Maybe it was Enos, but I don't think he's an artist. But whoever did her illustration did it right because she's kind of dour and like kind of sad. But then as soon as you hear someone go, well, maybe she'll want my dick, her expression changes drastically, and then people start dying. I feel like almost if they had just been like, maybe just give her some hot chocolate and see if she's okay, she would have been just like kosher and like not done anything. But like the minute she hears some kind of like possible sexual harassment or sexual assault implication, that's her trigger, and she just went off on them. It's stated or otherwise hinted at that the female is a super of some sort. They're well aware of her abilities, and she's essentially their nuke. And this is something that you will end up seeing a lot of in terms of how the Frenchman views her, and the way he talks to the group about her. I don't want to go into too much with that because I want you guys to see his dynamic with her play out, but it's very familiar with the version that we got on the show.
That's interesting. It would have been really hilarious if she like committed to the whole I guess deception thing and like showed up as a Girl Scout. But that's just in my mind, my little depraved mind. Like the real jiggers up. Like, see if she's got any what are those cookies that everybody likes?
Mints?
Yeah, them Thin Mints. See if she's got some Thin Mints. And then that's what that'll be fun.
I need to interject because fuck Thin Mints. It's Samoa's, or you can go fuck yourself. I don't want your goddamn Thin Mints. I don't want your Snickerdoodles. I don't want your thingamabobs or your hoojama what's. It's the purple pack of Samoa's, and then get the fuck off my property. I am very much old man yells at clouds. Would you like to buy us some Girl Scout cookies? You got Samoa's? No, we just sold out. Get the fuck off my land.
Yeah, it'll be even funny to think about them if they put this in the show, because from the show's perspective, it's loosely implied that she can't necessarily understand everything people are saying to her. So that what if she wants some penis thing might have got taken a little bit farther than a verbal thing, and then she would have killed him.
It's entirely possible. So next up we meet Mother's Milk, MM, still the worst name in comic history. There's going to be some things about this character that I'm sure are going to fuck some people's heads. So in the show, he's kind of played as I don't want to say a recovering ex-member of the crew, because that would imply that he's got some issues, but he's gone a 180. He's no longer a violent maniac who's running around with Butcher blowing people up. He's now working at a detention center for angry young men, and he's trying to help them get on the straight and narrow. He has a young child who's all of like 5 or 6 years old, I think is her age, and he's married. And he's trying to show his wife that he's changing his ways. In the comic, his wife is now his ex-wife. His wife in the show is this lovely, maybe not altruistic, but very much trying to be type of woman. While in the comics, she's a crack whore, is kind of the implication. She turns tricks. Again, I read ahead. She turns lots of tricks, and she's a very bad influence on her daughter. Her daughter, is mid to late teens. I would argue, maybe 18, maybe younger, and she's very disrespectful and very much badmouths her father. And her father tries to play the straight and narrow with her, so he doesn't try to overreact or come down too hard. But he is trying to be a father. She's just poorly influenced by her mother. So there's that rough of a dynamic. But Butcher does not give a flying fuckeroni. And he goes and tells the daughter, you need to straighten up. Your father's a good man. What the fuck are you doing? And in the process, he deals with some ruffians, some rapscallions who are there to pick her up. She doesn't like that Uncle Butcher ran them off. Does she call him Uncle Butcher or Uncle Billy?
Billy.
So Butcher does have a real name. It's Billy. My baloney has a first name. I'm not allowed to spell it. So there's a bit of a difference between Mother's Milk in the comic and in the show. He's more in the comic reserved, and he almost feels a little beaten down by life. While in the show, he's kind of just bored. Marcus, he was one of the more interesting characters when we first met him in the show. What did you think of Mother's Milk, whose name just makes me just cringe every time I say it? What do you think of this character in contrast?
Yeah, I'm not particularly fond of that name either. It honestly, it'll come off better. Anybody else, of course, people that know the show, it come off better being Homelander's middle name. Um, but yeah, I definitely like him. First off, you gotta appreciate like the people they cast for these characters in the show. Um, because they did a really great job of kind of in not only invoking the look and everything, but a lot of the characteristics and elevating a lot of the elements with these characters. So in the show, like I said, I dig it more because that's actually where the conflict everything comes in at, as we know, between Billy and Mother's Milk, because he's not having any of just Jesus, that sounds bad saying it, but MM, like he's not having any of Butcher's crap. And one of the best interactions, probably the most memorable moments of the show, came with a freaking popular song group reference. uh, when he was talking to the MM in a freaking train station.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, he's kind of melancholy here. Like he's the way they painted in the comic, he's at that horrible stage the three of us can imagine, because thankfully we're not fathers yet. But he's in that weird state with the kid of, you know, you're not being good enough of a parent, but you're being like you're being like the suckiest parent and like the best parent at the same time. And the kid's going back and forth, bipolar almost with it. Like you're not being good enough of a parent, but you're over-parenting me at the same time. It got to be one of the worst things to go through. So he's kind of just in this mode of like, F it. I'm going to just let her do a thing. And Billy's like not having it. That was actually a really great moment in the whole thing. What he said, a Glock's a pussy's gun or something like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
That's so hilarious.
the we have, what's another name for a crook? We haven't used crook. So the crook pulls out a gun on Billy, and Billy grabs the gun and smashes it in his hands, and he goes, "A Glock's a pussy's gun." Butcher's a fucking psychopath. I love it. The exact line is, Glock's a wanker's gun, son. Oh, wanker's gun. Fan-fucking-tastic. So the end of the second issue ends with basically all of this was told to Hughie as callbacks, kind of intercut with the story of who the boys are. So it kind of ends with him giving Hughie some money, saying, "Hey, come to New York, and we'll get you. We'll get your head on right." So that essentially set everyone up, set everything in motion, and it's a taste of what's to come. And I'm telling you, what's to come is it's violent, it's sexual, it's gonna be weird. So the question I ask to you, gentlemen, is this: do you want to finish reading this over the course of the next several weeks to month or two? Because we can, and it will be something. Zach, I feel like... Well, first off, Zach, what did you think of some of the names? Like, Mother's Milk, to me and Marcus, is like a jarring name. But you're just now getting into it, so you didn't have the 5 months of the TV show to lay on yet.
Mother's Milk is a very odd name. I'm sure we'll get down to actually understanding the reason behind it at some point. I dig the character. I think the character is interesting and a stark contrast from Billy. But yeah, I'm very puzzled by the name.
I believe in the show he outright says that's his birth name.
Really?
Marcus, am I right about that? Didn't he say that?
I'll say that again.
Didn't Mother's Milk in the show say to Hughie that's his birth name, Mother's Milk?
I want to say yeah, but it's interesting because I don't remember a lot of stuff ever coming up about his name.
I remember just once. It was when Hughie met him, I think. And I think it was when they were in the van. And he's like, is that like a code name or something? He goes, no, why would it be? Or something to that effect.
It's interesting because I don't think have we ever heard the other side of the perspective when he's on the phone with his girl? Because most of the time it's just him responding to something, but I don't know, because I would imagine if we do get his real name, she's gonna call it.
I think she calls him MM. Because they do have a lot of conversations, shockingly enough, in the show, because, there's the phone calls, there's the whole thing at the end of the season when they were, getting the families all together to hide him away.
Yeah.
So I do think she's addressed him, but I think it's either just Milk or MM. Maybe it's just M. I'm not sure. I have the need for rewatching this show.
Yeah. Mrs. Milk.
Marcus, would you like to finish out reading The Boys over the course of the next few weeks?
Yeah, I would. If for nothing else, it's a great holdover for getting the show back.
Season 2's coming. Zachary, are you on board with reading this continuously? There's only 76 issues. We should be able to pound this out in 6 weeks, give or take. 6 shows.
Yeah.
We'll do more than 2. I'll look at the arcs next time. If the arcs are 2 or 3 issues,
there's 72. There's 72 issues plus a mini series.
We don't need to read the miniseries. I don't think the miniseries offers too much.
Is it just on the dog? Is the miniseries on the dog?
Oh, there's actually 3 miniseries.
Well, that actually parallels well with the next thing of conversation. There's a new book coming out with the boys. It's called Dear Becky, Garth Ennis to pen sequel series for Dynamite. Ahead of the season 2 premiere of Amazon's The Boys, Garth Ennis is returning to the world. He and Derek Robertson, so that's the illustrator, created with a sequel series entitled The Boys, Dear Becky for Dynamite Entertainment. Originally, I never intended to do more with The Boys at all, but for obvious reasons, I found myself thinking about the story and characters again over the past couple of years, Ennis said in the statement. There was an aspect of the original story and one character in particular, but I never felt got a fair shake, Becky Butcher, whose demise motivates her husband Billy to do the terrible things he does, but who only actually appears in 2 issues of the original book. I liked writing Becky very much, almost as much as Butcher himself. And I wanted to look into greater detail at how her relatively brief appearance cast a long shadow. So, this might be part of the reason why we're getting what we're getting, because in the show, they take a bit of a different liberty with Becky Butcher. And I actually really like this first issue cover. Excuse me, I couldn't find the mute button in time. The first issue parallels the first issue of the original Boys series, with the 5 members of the crew standing around side what's believed to be a person looking up at the boys, and now you're seeing what they're looking down at, and it's a bloody puddle with the face of Becky Butcher in the middle of it, with more than likely Billy's foot in the pot and in the puddle of blood. So it's a nice way of doing it. I think this is going to be interesting to see how this goes about, especially considering the changes they made to the show, to see what they did. The article goes on to say Enos is joined by Russ Braun as the interior artist and the aforementioned Derek Robertson on cover art. The comic has always been close to my heart, and seeing the response to the show and the new drove of readers discovering the original material, making the timing for this series a wonderful opportunity to bring fresh material to the new readers as well as a treat for the original fans. Robertson said, "Revisiting these characters is a nice feeling, and creating covers for the series and collaborating with Enos again is a treat." I assume that's Robertson who said that. Dare Bicky picks up 12 years after the conclusion of the original 90-issue run, with Hughie and Annie Starlight's marriage in dire straits after a document threatens to unearth the secrets of the boys. The story will also utilize flashbacks to explore said secrets as well as classic moments from the original series. We were extremely pleased with the entire Boys series and felt like it was one of Garth and Derek's greatest works, and that is saying something, Dynamite CEO and publisher Nick Barucci said. When Garth came back to write a new story, we were surprised, but also excited, of course. Once he clued us in, we were floored. It's gratifying that Derek has been able to make time for the covers with his current schedule, and having Russ Braun return to draw the series too. We're excited to bring this new yarn to the fans and retailers. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I don't remember who originally published The Boys. I know it was on, I think it was like Vertigo for 6 issues. I'm gonna look this up. Any interest, Marcus, in picking up this new series once we finish the original series?
Yeah, I got some interest. I mean, because obviously we have a very, you have a very conflicting relationship, not with each other, but with the show when it comes to Becky Butcher.
Yup.
Because of obviously who's playing it, but her importance to the overall narrative, not only of certainly one side in the first season, but now in the second season, she's pretty much the linchpin. But she's, played by this angelic creature. So it's interesting that they're taking that route, and just besides them kind of putting the focus on her, and giving probably a different take as we've seen in the comic from the show, like the concept of seeing like a marriage between Hughie and well, I guess if they continue to draw him like they did in the first run, Simon Pegg and Starlight. So that'll be interesting to see if things are still lighting up. Those that watch the show will get that reference. If things are still lighting up between the two of them.
Chantel Van Satin, a.k.a. The Flash's true love, Patty Spivot.
Yeah.
I said it. Fucking find me. Find me, Iris Stans. Find me. The book was originally published on Wildstorm for the first 6 issues before being moved over to Dynamite for the next, I can do math, 71, 61, 68. I don't know. 64 issues. Yeah, I think that's right. I think it is 64 issues. Zach, 72 minus 6. What is that? 66. God damn it.
You got it. You got it.
Math.
I'm so bad at myself right now. So 66 issues dropped on Dynamite. They're going to have another series to go, so it'll be interesting to see how that transpires. Thackeray.
Yes.
How are you enjoying The Boys so far?
It's definitely interesting. I mean, I like you and Marcus, I am a big fan of the supers, but to see like a series that's like it's almost kind of like taking like all those superhero shows from the 90s and even like the modern ones, the modern movies that there's just so much rampant property destruction
Mm-hmm.
and taking it to the next level of there's property destruction and there's innocent lives being lost, and then the next level of and they don't really care. It's definitely an interesting idea.
Well, for next week's show, we are going. Well, not next week's show. Marcus and I will probably be back next week for a recap of sorts. Probably catch you up on some My Hero because, goddamn, I thought we were going to be in trouble after we got through with the All for One arc, considering that was supposed to be their big bad, and they blew him off in the third season. Like, where do you go now? But then all of a sudden, this Yakuza arc, it's just been so goddamn good, and Le Millionaire is just the best. I don't know. Marcus, like, my heart broke for that young man. And then Deku's all like, check this shit out. I got a fucking Energizer bunny on my back. We're going to have some fun. I'm like, what is going on? So next week, or not next week, when we come back in 2 weeks, when Zachary returns, we will be doing the second and third arcs, Cherry, issues 3 through 6, and Get Some, 7 through 10. So issues 3 through 10. That's 7 issues.
Okay.
I feel like we can manage 7 issues.
We could do it.
We definitely do it. So with that being said, we're done with the review section of today's show. Marcus, Zach, is there anything that caught your eye that you feel is worth bringing up on a conversation of sorts?
Nothing for me.
Are we surprised about the Obi-Wan stoppage?
I didn't hear about it, so yeah,
there
kind
was.
of. Yeah, kind of, because like I didn't know that was a thing. I heard a rumor, but then I also saw that it wasn't actually a rumor, but now I just, CBR.com says Disney Plus delays production on Obi-Wan series. And you're not going to find out why, so I'm not going to click on it. So, there's a thing. I don't know. I'm not. Marcus, are you?
Nah, I mean the whole thing apparently is that, like, they holding up for better scripts, and I certainly get that. I mean the franchise and the whole can really not take any more L's in a major way, and they're really hanging on by a well woven thread in terms of the Mandalorian. So at least somebody's showing some type of sense by not rushing this to the production with lackluster writing, because they can't take any more lackluster writing. So, but now apparently people are calling for Kathleen Kennedy to be dumped, which is like how many years too late? But whatever.
Right. We've been demanding Kathleen Kennedy be ousted for years now. She ruined the iconic franchise of films. Not the epics, Zach. What do they refer to as?
The trilogy?
No, the saga.
Oh, the saga.
The saga. That is Star Wars. It's no longer a saga. It's a slow drudge into disarray. It took you creating the greatest Muppet since Kermit J. Frog to bring interest back into the series, and which doubles down to my theory. Muppets always make things better. Schindler's List, better with Solder and Waldorf.
Yeah, and as Chad confirmed that we did on a recent show, those things on Mr. Rogers' Imaginary Neighborhood was not.
Those weren't puppets.
Land of Make Believe was not puppets. They were finger ornaments.
They were the devil's hellspawn brought to the world to tempt Mr. Rogers into being less Mr. Rogersies. Good news, it didn't work. I mean, it scared the shit out of me, man. Dude, 70s TV show was not made for kids. Like those little finger ornaments, the goddamn HR puffin stuff, the flying spaghetti monster thing, the one-eyed, one-horned flying purple people eater. Like, What the fuck were you people on 40 years ago? God damn. So, all right, that'll do it for tonight then. You can find us at realnerdcorp.com, RealNerdCorp.com. We're also on Twitter at NERDCorp, on Instagram at RealNerdCorp. Our woman crush for the week is the chick who was in Mutants. What was that show called?
You talking about Gifted? Yeah.
Gifted. Yeah. Mutants. I
I
know what I'm talking about.
Natalie.
Alan Zine.
Land. Gorgeous. Yeah.
All Lang Syne. That's her name. For all acquaintance we forgot and never brought to mind. Natalie Allen. I think it's Allen. I think that. Why must people spell common names stupidly? Like, if I look at a name and I see Stephe and you tell me it spells Steve, I'm gonna be like, no, it doesn't.
Yeah, man. I guess people want to feel special. It's the same way when I was in kindergarten and I was in a class with a dude named DeMarcus. I'm like, why the hell you put a D with an apostrophe in front of a perfectly good Marcus? Like, what?
Why would you put a D in front of a perfectly good Marcus? Like, I legit saw some chick's name spelled Jyssica. I'm like, Jessica? And she's like, no, it's Jessica. I'm like, bitch, no, it's not. The Y and the E do not make the same sound.
Yeah, now they coming up with their own special rules for vowels to justify that.
Motherfucker. Why must we suck at our own language so goddamn always?
Well, see, I've seen like a couple names where it's like they deliberately just spell them out as much as possible so you know how to pronounce it. Like, I think there was one that was Lori, but it was Lowree.
Well, that is Dume, Doom. That's so dumb we added an E. But let's even be honest about this. Zach, do you know I still to this day don't know with as much certainty as I should how to spell your name? I believe it's CH, but I'm always like,
Correct.
or is it CK?
It is definitely the H.
Why must we have two spellings of Zach? Bitch, that name ain't that cool. All right, granted, it was a little cool in the early 90s when we had the Black Power Ranger. His name was Zach, and he did hip-hop keto, even though that's not what a hop keto does. But whatever. That still annoys me. Like, he's doing, what's that Brazilian dance fighting? He's essentially doing that. Oh, God, what the fuck is that called?
Capoeira?
He's essentially doing capoeira, which is fine. But Hapkido's a grappling and throwing defensive martial arts. You don't dance and strike with it, God damn it. I'm sorry. It bugs me. As a kid, I thought it was the coolest shit ever. Like, oh, yeah, I want to learn hip-hop keto. And everyone's like, it's not a real martial art. I'm like, Zach does it. And they're like, you're a fucking idiot. Power Rangers isn't real. Shut up, yes it is. I think I was more upset finding out that Power Rangers wasn't real than I was when Santa Claus was real to me as not being real. I was like, God damn. You mean that martial arts doesn't work? Oh. Well, I guess I got to go tell the school bully that I'm not going to fight him after school after all. So, yeah. Words are dumb. The English language sucks.
It does. It does.
It's overly complicated and just stupid.
Yeah, people are dumb, and Santa's basically a home invader with a pass. Yeah.
To be fair, he also eats all the crap in your house. So I feel like he serves a biological environmental need, Marcus. Santa. Not the hero we need. No, not the hero we deserve, but the hero we need. So anyway, our wrestler of the week is... I completely forgot.
Boy, right? David Boy Smith.
Yes, David Boy Smith Jr. He won the Opera Cup, which was a trophy that his family has had for the last 100 years. Last won by Stu Hart. Really good couple of episodes of MLW's Fusion. I'm going to be watching NWA Power later on tonight. So,
You're gonna love it.
Yeah, what was that?
No, I was like, you're gonna love it.
Well, I hope so because I'm gonna watch it while playing with some Zion Williamson. Because after last night's debut, oh, that young man, him and Luka Doncic, I wish were on the same team because oh god, the magic those two would make. So Marcus's personal stuff you can find him on Twitter at ParadoxKid ParaDoxKid.
That's me.
You can also find him on his occasional other podcast, The True Penny Podcast, TruePennyShow, on Twitter. That's The True Penny Show on Twitter. Zachary can be found on Instagram and DeviantArt at the same handle. It's Radiance2020, RADIANCE2020.
So good.
So good. And you and I will be having a conversation this weekend about our next issue of our comic.
All right.
I have some ideas, including the debut of Swisher's character.
Ooh.
Who's going to be a cowboy hat with a mustache. This comic is getting weird, and I'm here for it. He's essentially going to be Stan Hansen, the character, Zach, but all he does is hit people with lariats. That's his whole shtick. I think you're going to love the debut issue. Oh, and Marcus, we've refined your character. He's going to be a holy man of sorts. He's going to be the bunny who sees all. People come to him for advice. He will tell them the advice, and they will ignore it because they're dumb. And then they'll get hurt because slapstick comedy is funny. And the bunny will just kind of go, fucking idiots. Well, he won't say fucking because he will be above the swearing. I have so many ideas for our hackneyed comic. It's not even funny. All right. My personal stuff is Chad Nerdcorp on Twitter, ChadNerdCorp, and on the Instagram at Chad's Photo Hut. Be sure to find me on fansided.com. I'm the co-site expert for Factory of Sadness and the Red Shirts Always Die pages. Gentlemen, if either of you two want to write about Star Trek, let me know. The money's not great, but you will get paid at least something. And you can also find me on fansidedmma.com as well. So with all that being said, we are done for the day. We'll be back next week, me and Marcus, for some show on Thursday. Not sure yet what yet. And be sure to tune in Sunday at about 11-ish, 10:45-ish, 11-ish, after the Royal Rumble goes off the air. Marcus and I will recap the NWA's pay-per-view events, Hard Times, as well as this year's Royal Rumble event. So it's going to be a lot of fuckery. Tune in. Gentlemen, anything else?
No, I'm good.
No.
All right. Well, then, if old acquaintance, be whatever and never brought to mind, let's get the fuck out of here. Marcus, take us home.
Good night, me.